Hi, everyone. So my name is Matt Moyo, and I'm here to talk to you about, leadership and project management. My background, I'm a lecturer, a leader in the field that I lecture in, and also an infection preventionist. And just to give you some context about, how I came to be here to talk to you about leadership and project management. Well, it happened that, some months ago, I was asked to deliver a lecture to some infection prevention control practitioners who are on the master's program at the University of West London. And sat in the audience was the program lead and the current IPS president, Professor Jane Wilson. And she heard me tell a story about how I led a successful quality improvement project whilst I was an infection prevention nurse in an acute hospital trust. And after she heard me tell this story, she came up to me and she said, "Do you know what, Matt? The lecture you've delivered needs to be shared with other practitioners because it's exemplified a style of leadership that's actually pretty powerful and very useful in project management. And that style of leadership is actually called humble leadership. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So, humble leadership and project management, but mainly focusing on quality improvement projects. So the best place to start is always to define, the concept we're about to delve into. And here's a definition of humble leadership. And I like this definition. In fact, there's many definitions out there, but this is one that I've chosen because, well, pretty much I like it. And it's by Owens and Heckman. And they define humble leadership as to show generous respect to all team members through different ways, such as accepting their criticism, encourage them by delegation of power, and asking their suggestions. So a pretty simple and powerful definition. And I love it. And as we talk, or as we go through this talk, I just want you to be listening out to some of those keywords that are highlighted in blue, generous respect, accepting, criticism, and asking for suggestions. But you see, the thing about definitions is sometimes they do not tell us the behaviors that are required of something. So I thought it would also be good to just, talk about what are the behaviors of a humble leader. And a loose definition of a behavior is basically how someone acts. It is what a person does to make something happen or to make something change or to keep things the same. So what are the behaviors of a humble leader, remembering the definition that I've just shared? And the first thing that we need to be aware of is, being a humble leader is about being organized and providing a clear vision to the team. I just put this in summary as, leadership to the team. Let's face it. The key word there in leadership is lead. Okay, so you have to have that behavior, that capability of being organized in your leadership. And then the next thing is about understanding and unashamedly being aware of your personal and team strengths. So your personal strengths and limitations, and your team strengths and limitations, and that's including acknowledging without shame that there are things you as the leader, right, do not know about the project. And that's powerful, actually, when you come into a project with that awareness and that honesty. It generates a lot of respect from the team members you're working with, and they can also be vulnerable with you and go like, "Hey, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses." And I've just summarized that as awareness of personal and team strengths and limitations. The other thing is about being welcoming to help and support and the ideas of the people around you within the team and then outside of the team. So I've summarized this as seeking and welcoming appropriate support. Okay, so we've covered three things so far. Being organized, understanding, and being unashamedly aware of personal and team strengths and limitations. Being welcoming to the help and support and ideas of others. And then the final part is about being encouraging to others. So encouraging others through the delegation of power and tasks. So I've summarized that as trusting others in the team to invest in and champion the cause, whatever the cause may be. In the context of this talk, okay, the cause will be to achieve an infection prevention and control goal, okay, but the principles will be layered out as we talk through. So remembering the definition that I gave you at the beginning, and I'll just say it out to you again, and the definition is this: to show generous respect to all team members through different ways, such as accepting their criticism, encouraging them by the delegation of power, and asking their suggestions, okay? Now, for most people who've heard me talk, they know this about me. I like to give acronyms. and because I just think they're a good way of helping people to remember things. So if you notice, the things that are highlighted in brackets in bold there, they actually are spelling something, L.A.S.T. Okay, so here's what I'm proposing, that the qualities of a humble leader, based on the definition we've had at the beginning, is that leader is somebody who provides leadership to their team. That humble leader is somebody who is also aware of their personal strengths and limitations as well as their team's strengths and limitations. That humble leader is a person who also is seeking and welcoming appropriate support. It's one thing to seek support and it's another thing to also welcome. But this humble leader has got that attitude. I seek that support and then I welcome it. And then the final part is about trusting others in the team to invest in and champion the cause. And you'll find that it's an intentional spelling of last. Why? Because you see, when you're a humble leader, you're not seeking to be seen first in the team, but rather you're purposefully making yourself the last person to be noticed. And that's all about humility. You're putting your pride to the side. And the working of humility as such, humility does not seek to promote itself, but rather it seeks to support others. Okay, so there we go. Some qualities there we've discussed, a bit of the behaviors of the humble leader, and then a definition that I've also given you. But I think it is good for you to hear the story, okay, that inspired Jenny to ask me to come and to talk to you about, humble leadership and this particular project. Now, interestingly, as I tell you this story, okay, I'm believing and I'm hoping that most of you listening are keen academics. So you can do yourself a favor. If you've never heard of the concept of humble leadership, okay, you will be impressed, surprised, shocked to know that actually, if you type in to your academic search engines, okay, or even onto Google itself, if you type in humble leadership and project management, okay, you will get so many hits. And that's profound, isn't it? Because it just shows you a great body of work. A lot of research has gone into understanding and appreciating that actually a humble leadership style is absolutely powerful and effective when somebody is actually leading a project. And in this case, my story is going to be telling you about, a quality improvement project that I was leading at that time that this incident happened. So what happened? So, okay, this is during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's in 2020. And whilst I was still working in clinical practice, one of my colleagues went to investigate a hospital, an outbreak in a ward of COVID-19. Then after the investigation, they came to the conclusion that a certain piece of shared equipment may have been responsible for honor transmission. Okay, so therein lies our problem. So from an infection prevention control perspective, here's a bit of the theory. We know that inanimate objects, that are contaminated with pathogenic microorganisms can spread infection from one person to the other. In this case, you'll be interested to know, that this particular piece of equipment that were of concern were pulse oximeters. So patients' fingers were coming into direct contact with pulse oximeters, okay, and were getting contaminated. And what's interesting is when staff were asked about their practices of decontaminating this piece of equipment, it was discovered that actually they acknowledged they did not always decontaminate the pulse oximeters. Now, let's think about, the human body for a while, and especially the finger. Okay, our hands, we know as infection control practitioners, right? Our hands get to a lot of stuff. And the most powerful thing, to stop the spread of many infections is actually good hand hygiene. But our patients in hospital, when you think about it, I don't know, if you're honest with yourself, how many of us do encourage our patients to do hand hygiene properly? Probably not as many. And do we actually even give our patients the opportunities for these things? Probably not. Okay, so where are these patients' fingers going? Okay, so sometimes they're in the nose, sometimes they're scratching bits, different bits of the body. So a lot of things are happening with these fingers. And then these are the same fingers we then come and put pulse oximeters on. And then people, and I'm challenging you, if you're a person in clinical practice, I challenge you to go and investigate this and look at how often, your staff clean pulse oximeters between patients, or even after a round of observations, okay? And I'm sad, but almost confident to say you will discover that not many people decontaminate this piece of equipment. So basically, this was the scenario that we're facing here, right? And so, okay, we decided that, okay, we're going to have to do a project where we can improve the practice of these pulse oximeters being actually decontaminated. And also, in the same breath, also encourage hand hygiene to be championed by staff to patients. So this is me being organized now at the beginning of the project. So at the beginning of the project, okay, I was aware that in order to actually run the project effectively, right, I had to do a systematic investigation and examination of the problem, and then find solutions to the problem, right? So there was me being organized. So we're already beginning to see the first trait or the first behavior being organized, going like, okay, I know the problem, okay, I've understood it, but I need to start planning about how we're going to tackle this. So what I did was I employed a set of tools. Okay, now for those people who tuned in specifically because they heard quality improvement, let me just share with you a little secret. This is something that I've discovered. And what I've discovered is this. I want to think and propose quite strongly that many people are facing failed quality improvement projects because they probably do not know the tools to use when they're actually doing these projects, okay? And here are some of those tools, okay? These tools include what we call a stakeholder analysis. These tools also include what we call process mapping. They include what we also call driver diagrams, the PDSA cycles, and measurement. So these are the tools that I decided from the beginning I'll be using, okay, in this particular project that I was doing. Now, thankfully, you know, it's quite interesting actually that these particular tools, somebody taught me about these tools, and it was incidentally Professor Jenny Wilson herself who taught me about these tools. But then I realized that actually I needed to employ them, okay, into the project and to employ them in the correct way for a shorted success. And then I also employed a framework within which these tools would be worked, okay, when I was actually doing the project, okay? So I'm being organized here, right? Okay, so then we move on. So stage one of the framework that I'll be using here by Reed and Bell, the stage one is what is actually happening. That's stage one. And in here, we then employ the first tool, which is the stakeholder analysis. So basically, I say, right, listen, I know the problem, but I would like to understand it from the perspective of the clinicians who are on the ground in the particular ward where this incident happened. So then the stakeholder analysis was done. We invited key people to come to the meeting. And the idea of the stakeholder analysis is to ask people, listen, what do you understand about this particular problem that is happening around us? So we did it in a large room. There were 6 informants, and I want you to pay attention to who the informants are, because this is key. 1 ward leader, 2 what we call band 6s, so like junior sisters, or sometimes just called sisters. So they are just a band below the ward leader. Healthcare assistants, okay, and a student nurse. So these were the first informants, and they were very important informants, because if you understand anything about stakeholder analysis, okay, the people who actually do the work usually gravitate towards what we call, you know, people who might have a reasonable amount of low power and influence, but are highly interested or are impacted by the event that you're actually interested in, okay? So can you see where they are in the stakeholder analysis? Their health assistants are there in that quadrant there, right there, towards your bottom right. Okay, so these are the people that are coming in, and you've also got the ward sisters who are just above them there, because they also have high interest in this particular incident, right? Now, don't forget, there's people, the patients and the care and the matrons are also on that side. They're important, and we'll come to them slightly later. Okay, so there we are. Okay, we have a stakeholder analysis, and then we mapped. Okay, the process of them taking patients' observations and how they did it. And we came up with 19 steps. So this took a lot of time. So they helped me to understand their job. Okay, so can you see that I didn't know how they did their job? Because if I'm trying to fix this problem of they're not, you know, encouraging patients to clean their hands, or they're not actually doing the cleaning of the SATS probes when they're doing the OBS rounds. Okay, I needed to understand what they were doing. Okay, and I'm not an expert about what they're doing. They are the experts. So they told me the process, and we found 19 steps within an observation round between patients. So that was quite revolutionary and quite revealing as well, because then they understood what they do, and then I understood what they do. Okay, and then if you see the stars in this particular diagram in front of you, you see these were the key moments in which cleaning was done in their first initial observation of how they did the rounds. And can you see, okay, if you look carefully, you know, the cleaning of equipment was done in very odd places, and two groups emerged actually. So one group would clean their SATS probes. You know, they would claim that they would clean it after they've removed it from the finger. Okay, and then other people claim that they would clean it after they've done the blood pressure, they've done the SATs, then they remove the blood pressure, they remove the SATs probe, and then after that, then they clean everything. But then I ask the question, okay, you claim to be cleaning these things at 0.15 or at 0.16. How many of you are actually cleaning these? And then the numbers reveal themselves. Oh, maybe 2 out of 6 occasions, because there's 6 people in a bay, maybe 3 out of 6. So so then I ask the question, okay, listen, let us identify the needs in this process, because there are some process gaps, right? And if you look carefully, like if you were to go back to the image, there are some process gaps there. But then again, I still need the help of the attendees, okay? So it became evident that during observations, the performance of patient hand hygiene was never considered by the attendees, because actually, if you go back to there, you actually don't see hand hygiene for patients anywhere, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So there we go. We find a significant process gap, but also we see gaps in the cleaning as well. So, but it's being identified collectively together with the people. And so I then ask the next question, okay, we find that there's this assumption also that equipment is cleaned before a task is done. That's the image to your left. When it comes to the problems that made people not to clean the equipment after they'd used it, one of them, so one group says constant interruption. You know, I'm doing my OBS and someone disturbs me. And somebody says, oh, you know, interruptions, people take the machine away, stuff like that. So only this group can give me that knowledge. I wouldn't know this. And they wouldn't know this without sharing and verbalizing it. So we've now identified the problem. Now, let's prioritize how we fix this. Once again, I did not go in with, this is my solution. No, I handed it over to the group again. Listen, now that we see the problems, what do you think we should prioritize? And resoundingly, it was, you know what, obviously we need to be actually encouraging patients to wash their hands, because it's a big gap. But also we need to be finding ways to remove the barriers that are stopping us from what? Cleaning the pulse oximeters. Oh, wonderful. But can you see here, I'm working together with this group. I am not imposing, and I wasn't imposing at that time, but I was working together with them. Obviously, I was providing the structure by which we were working, but then they were massively involved. And then came the most beautiful part, which is the identification of solutions. Now, this is where I think most people go wrong. And the solutions did not come from me. No, they came from the group. I asked them, how should we fix this? And they came up with ideas I had no clue would even be a possibility. And I think one of the best solutions that they came up with, for example, was, oh, we can use our ward WhatsApp group to talk to each other about remembering to ask patients to wash their hands before their OBS are done and even after, but also to remind staff to clean equipment in between patients. And it turns out, when you look at the interventions about this group that worked, that was a very powerful intervention. I would have never thought of it, but it came from them. They also suggested other things that you can see there, including one of them that I really enjoyed. Have you cleaned your OBS machine and SATS probe sticker? And incidentally, that also worked. It didn't come from me. Then we implemented it. And then this is where I gave it back to the group. Because remember, already, if you can feel what's happening here, if by the fact that I invited them, I had the ideas, we got to engaging into the process mapping experience, I asked them for the solutions. The group was already invested. And so by the time we came to the PDSA cycle, incidentally, I only had one cycle because they already knew, okay, what they wanted to achieve. So I went back, I produced a driver diagram for them based on what they had proposed with their solutions, based on what they wanted to achieve. 100% of patients getting, hand hygiene offered to them, and 100% of the patients getting the successful screen before they actually even touch their fingers. So that was their goal. Okay, it's measurable as well. So there we go. So I set up a little survey for them, and at the beginning of the survey, day 0, there was 0% compliance, which was expected because obviously they identified there's a weakness. On day 7, there was 98% compliance, but that's what we call a knee-jerk reaction. The true change only happens over time. So what did I do? I waited 28 days later, and I went and I did a little survey, okay? But here's the secret: not just me, but other people in the world were doing the survey at different points in times, and it was about 95% compliance. Then I waited 98 days, right? 98 days later, went back, but then this time it wasn't me who did the audit for them. It was somebody who was hidden within the team. It's almost like a covert audit was done, and here's what was impressive. At 98 days, compliance was 100%. At that point, we say that changes happened. But I want you to know it wasn't because of Matt's geniusness. It was because the process was followed that was helpful, and that was organized, that was respectful to people's ideas, that was aware of my limitations and their limitations as well, that helped them to actually appreciate, their own weaknesses and strength, and in which I was constantly inviting their ideas. And sometimes I gave ideas and then I quickly stopped because I realized they were not working. They had better ideas about their own problem solution. A few months later, actually no, a year later, I left the trust, but a year later from the conception of the project in July, which is this year, in June, I sent an email to the people who sit in the trust, going like, oh, how is it happening with this project? And then they say, do you know what, the project is not really happening, but here's the thing, we still do the audits, and we can tell you that compliance is still above 90%. So sustainable change was achieved because now I didn't even need to be there to run the project. People were so invested, it worked for themselves. Why did this work? Well, here we go. Humble leadership is what? To show generous respect to all team members, okay? As we identify, to accept the criticism, to encourage them through the delegation of power, and then to ask for their suggestions. So as a humble leader, what did I do? I led the team, provided a clear vision. We want to be able to sort out this problem of COVID not spreading, but also in a way that works for you. I was aware of my limitations and made them aware of theirs. I sought support from them. Now, for anybody who knows project management, that's where the matrons came in. Okay, I didn't say this explicitly, but I'm going to say it now. The matrons were on the side. I needed their buy-in as well. So I sought their support in terms of funding some of the things that we need. For example, one of the suggestions was to have more machines. I trusted the team and it paid off because I didn't need to be there anymore. I promoted them and they did well. I'll close with this. This is a good quote and a closing remark. Research has found that humble leadership significantly influences goal achievements through team performance and team effectiveness. That ultimately leads to the success of a team project. Thank you so much for listening.